Hello, welcome to Effect a Change and our Focus on Fiction section. As you already know, fiction gives us an escape from reality, and sometimes it offers a different perspective of it. Our Focus on Fiction segments offer a variety of stories and series to help you get away for just a little while. I've put links in the description to the original authors' works and their profiles. There will be a lot of stories from a lot of writers coming up, so be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when a new story comes out. I've also included a link to support me through Ko-fi and PayPal, should you be so generously inclined. Your donations help me to create these stories and get these authors recognized for the great writers that they are. And without any further ado, let's get into today's story. The Figure by Ben Ulansey. Lev enjoyed going for walks in the middle of the night. He had spent most of his life living in Chicago, but in downtown Chicago, a walk in the middle of the night wasn't something that appealed to him much. Here, in this small suburban town, though, there was a sense of serenity that seemed to settle into the neighborhood each night by the time the clock struck 2 a.m. But this town felt very different than Chicago. Here, the sounds of police sirens were replaced by crickets. The subtle droning of traffic was replaced by the croaking of frogs from a nearby pond. The light pollution that lit up the far corners of the night sky was replaced by unfamiliar darkness. Complete and total darkness. This is what Lev enjoyed about these walks so much. There was an unrivaled sense of privacy that he felt as he walked through this dark neighborhood each night. It was serene. On this night, he'd walked past darkened homes along the quiet street. On the other side of the street was a forest that filled each night with an orchestra of mysterious music. A wild combination of chittering, chirping, croaking, clicking, and cracking would emerge from the breathing forest in those late hours. It was clear to Lev that the forest itself was alive. But this didn't bother him. To Lev, all of planet Earth was alive in some way or another. The oceans, the trees, and the winds all had a certain presence to them. He continued walking down the street, humid summer air drifting lazily by him with each step that he took. With arms stretched out wide in both directions, Lev, too, felt alive. He reached the pond at the bottom of the street and listened. The deepened croak of a bullfrog resounded off of a nearby tree. He continued walking. Once he'd passed the pond, the houses on his right began to grow sparse. He was surrounded now by a forest. The houses that remained were so dark that Lev doubted they could even be occupied. Lev looked for the light of even a candle or a stove clock, but couldn't find one. He couldn't see any light whatsoever. He walked further and further into darkness. The trees surrounding him grew denser and denser. With the sound of nature all around him, his footsteps began to grow muted. He looked up through the trees and noticed how starry the night was. He breathed a deep, relaxed breath and closed his eyes. When he opened them, he saw a figure. The figure didn't seem to move. It was standing there motionless in total darkness. Lev looked toward it and his footsteps slowed. The figure stood frozen. It was so dark that Lev could hardly tell whether it had even noticed him. But slowly, the sphere on top of the figure's shoulders began to rotate and revolved inhumanly toward Lev. The movement was labored and unbalanced, but unnervingly patient. Eyes that contained no pupil sat fixated now on Lev. Suddenly, the figure began to dance. It wasn't a lively dance. It was sad, slow, and passionate. The figure's hands glided slovenly through the darkness. Its movements were jagged, unsteady, but graceful. It continued dancing idly through the darkness without rhyme or reason. It twirled about without purpose. The figure again looked at him. Lev stood frozen, captivated. The figure began moving its hands slowly toward the sky. It seemed to be reaching for something, yearning almost. With hands raised vertically above it now, it allowed its head to sink towards its chest. It looked once again toward Lev. It let out an awful shriek that echoed through the night. Suddenly, it began motioning directly at him. Its movements were fluid but rapid. Lev was powerless to move away. It glided frantically toward him, moving at an inhuman pace. The forest descended suddenly into a deafening silence. It reached Lev. I know you enjoyed this story. Show your support to the writer by following the links in the description and sharing it with your friends. Support this channel with likes, shares, and by subscribing. Any donations are greatly appreciated as well.